So, picture this. April 11, 2022. A courtroom in Fairfax County, Virginia, and two Hollywood stars kicking off a battle that would become one of the most talked about events of the year. I mean, Johnny Depp suing Amber Heard for a whopping $50 million, and she countersues him for double that. $100 million! It's insane already, right?
Absolutely. And it wasn't just the size of those numbers that grabbed attention, it was the decision to live stream the trial. That brought the whole thing to millions of screens, turning it into, well, a spectacle. Some might even say it was more like a reality TV show than a court case.
Exactly. And you've got this global audience glued to every word, every expression, every viral moment. People started choosing sides. Team Depp, Team Heard, almost like it was a sporting event. But let's not forget, they were there for a serious reason. Defamation claims flying both ways.
Right. The centrepiece of it all was the jury. They eventually awarded Depp $10 million in compensatory damages, plus an extra $5 million in punitive damages, although that got reduced to $350,000 due to state law. On the other hand, Heard wasn't left empty-handed. In her counterclaim, she was awarded $2 million after proving that one of Depp's lawyer's statements was defamatory.
It's a lot to unpack, isn't it? The tension in that courtroom, the stakes involved. It was explosive. And as electrifying as the verdict was, it left people with so many questions. Like, how much of this was about the actual legal arguments? And how much was shaped by the massive audience watching it all unfold?
That's the fascinating part, isn't it? The trial didn't just play out in court, it became this larger-than-life event, shaping public opinion as it went. And that's where things get really interesting.
And that brings us to the heart of what had everyone so riveted, the conflicting claims of abuse. Depp described himself as the true victim, accusing Amber of being controlling and even violent at times. But Amber? She told a completely different story, portraying Depp as abusive, especially under the influence of drugs and alcohol. It was like two opposing realities playing out before the world.
Right? And that's what made it so complex for the jury. Both sides had witnesses, recordings, even medical evaluations. But the key issue here was credibility. From Depp's side, his team leaned on inconsistencies in Amber's stories, highlighting moments where her claims didn't quite add up.
Yeah, like when Amber didn't seem to match her emotional testimony with, let's say, certain physical evidences or lack of them. And that knife she gave Depp as a gift? That raised eyebrows. If you're alleging abuse, why give your partner a knife?
Exactly. And from the other side, Amber's team tried to drive home Depp's history of substance abuse, saying it made him unpredictable, volatile. They painted a stark picture of a man who, well, could be dangerous.
But here's the legal crux. Johnny Depp argued that these accusations, even indirectly through Amber's 2018 op-ed, ruined his career. The tricky bit was convincing a jury of actual malice, essentially proving Heard lied deliberately. That's a high bar for public figures like Depp.
And it's not surprising that public opinion split. For some, it boiled down to whether Johnny seemed more honest on the stand or whether Amber's testimony resonated. But the jury's decision to award Depp $10 million suggested they found her less convincing overall.
And let's not forget how the spectacle of the trial messed with all this. The live cameras, the memes, the hashtag wars, it all added to the noise, making it harder to separate the legal facts from public theatrics. But I reckon the really fascinating part was how the evidence tangled with the sheer weight of public perception.
That's a great point, actually. The trial wasn't just confined to the courtroom. Everything spilled out into the public consciousness. And when you think about how heavily this played into the jury's considerations, it leaves you questioning just how much the court process and broader media landscapes truly influence one another.
And speaking of the public consciousness, you couldn't ignore how social media amplified everything about this trial. Platforms like TikTok, not exactly where you'd expect serious legal discourse, became a launch pad for public judgment. Hashtags like Justice for Johnny Depp didn't just trend, they racked up billions of views. It was a spectacle, with people breaking down every trial moment like analysts after a big game.
Yeah, and it wasn't just the volume of engagement, but also how decisive it was. Most of the content leaned heavily in Depp's favour, while posts supporting Heard, they barely scratched the surface, relatively speaking. Some argued that this tidal wave of online sentiment actually influenced the outcome, despite jurors saying they weren't affected.
But can we really ignore the power of that kind of public consensus? Millions of people watching, creating memes, sharing clips. It feels like the court of public opinion became larger than the actual courtroom itself. And you know what's even more alarming? The amount of misinformation circulating. False claims, exaggerated headlines, even conspiracy theories.
Don't forget those wild rumours about Heard using cocaine on the stand. Completely unfounded. Yet they spread like wildfire. And that kind of viral misinformation, honestly, it muddies the waters so much for anyone trying to make sense of what's true.
Exactly. And look, beyond just TikTok or Twitter, this trial tapped into some really deep issues. People started questioning how cases like this could reshape movements like Me Too. Are survivors going to think twice before speaking out, in fear of defamation suits?
Big questions. The danger, of course, is that this sets a precedent. If survivors feel they might be dragged into a public spectacle, torn apart by tweets and TikToks, they'll hesitate. And yet, this trial also raised awareness about hidden forms of domestic violence, including those experienced by men. So maybe it's a double-edged sword.
And what about the long-term implications for legal proceedings? The trial really highlighted this uneasy relationship between media, the legal system, and, let's face it, entertainment. As soon as cameras entered that courtroom, it stopped being a private legal battle and transformed into a worldwide event.
Right. And let's not forget about how this impacts justice itself. When millions of spectators are weighing in, many without first-hand knowledge of the case, it almost feels like the trial process itself is under siege. So it's not just about Depp and Heard anymore. It's about what this means for future high-profile cases.
And the takeaway? Well, for me, it's a reminder of how fragile public perception really is. Whether it's hashtags, viral moments, or just the flood of noise online, it's clear social media isn't just a spectator in cases like this. It's almost a participant now, shaping how we see the facts before they've even been laid out.
Couldn't agree more. And whether that's for better or worse, only time, and maybe the next high-profile trial, will tell. Well, thank you all for joining us in this deep dive into the Depp v. Heard saga. Hopefully, this episode has shed some light on the chaos, the legal drama, and the wider impact beyond the courtroom.
Yes, it's been quite the ride. On that note, we'll leave it here for today. Stay curious, keep questioning, and we'll see you next time.